Good day. Welcome to this lecture series in Godot.
Hello, good day, welcome back. In this video, we will consider the different types of scope that a variable can have. So let's go ahead and get started. Scope has to do about when and where we can access variables. So far, in this example, the only variable that we have created is the force variable, and this variable was created in the physics process function. So if we bring the ready function back, do you think that we will be able to access this force variable from inside of this function? So you can try it. You can try, let's print. So a lot of ways we can test certain things to see if it's working. We can just use a print function. So let's print. Well, you can see this will not work. How we know this? Because here is in red and it gives us here an error at 411. So, well, it says identifier force not declared in the current scope. So this is the scope of a function. All the variables declared inside of that function is within the scope of that function. So we see in this situation, we have a function physics process, and a function ready. The ready function cannot access the variables inside of the physics process function. Likewise, if we had a variable inside of the function ready, we would not be able to access that variable inside of the physics process function. So let's say we want to use force in multiple functions, not just one function. So then you might have to ask yourself, how do we fix this? Now, one way to do this, or to address this, is to create a variable inside here. So you can go here, variable force, copy, and Control V, paste, carry this up, Alt, up. Alright, so we see here. So this is one way to address this. So we have this variable force here. We wanted to use this variable inside of this function. One way to address this is to create another variable, call the variable the same name, force, and put it inside of this function. And while this could work, this is doubly work because they keep duplicating this. The whole point of using a variable is because we see here, right? We had 25, before we had 25, right? Just 25, 25, 25. I didn't want to manually put 25 everywhere, and every time we change 25 one place, we have to go and manually change 25 in every location. We created a variable force, we set the force to 25, and then so every time we change the value of force, this force would change. That's the reason why we use a variable. So to say now we have a function and the variable is in the function, and then we want to go on our next function and create the same variable and the variable the same name, so that every time you change the value of the variable here, you have to change the value of the variable here. This is double work, and that is it defeats the whole point of creating a variable to begin with. So what we could have done is pull the variable to the global scope. And what I'll do, I'll delete this. I'll just comment this out, number sign, comment this out. And what I'll do, press Alt, then press up. And I pull this to the global scope here. Press back. That's what I just do right about here. So you realize now we have force declared quite up here. The variable force is declared up here. It is not declared here. It is not declared in function variable. It is not declared in the ready function. It is not declared in a physics function. But because it is declared in the global scope, these other functions can read the variable and it knows what it is. So the variables that are declared in the global scope are available to all the functions in the script. So if I go here and I play the game, you can go here. We are seeing the force. This is the value for force, 1000. Remember, when you have the call the function ready, you print in force. This is the value of force. And you can also see the game. You can see the game here and you can control the player. The inputs, actions for the player is okay. So another thing I want to mention is that you can create a variable of the same name inside of different functions, but you cannot do that inside of the same function. So we see here we have a variable inside of a function, but we can't create a variable of the same name inside of the same function. So two variables of the same name inside the same function will generate an error. But if you come out of this, you can go here and type variable force. What you see here also, if you have a variable and the variable has a particular name in the global scope, we can have a function and we can have a variable with the same name inside of the function scope, because you can see that here we have the variable force here. Within this here we have the variable force, and with this here we have the variable force, and it's not generating an error. So you can comment this out if you want. So let me show you back this here. So let me return this variable here. So this is the global scope here, right? And the force is 1000. But inside of this function, what will happen? We have the variable force. It has the same name, but it has the value of 10. What will happen for this function? This function will use the force of 10 rather than the force of 1000. Now, in this function here, the physics process function, there is no function of the same name right about now. It can only access the global scope variable. So what it will use this variable and it will apply the force of 1000. It will not be able to access this because this is another function. And since there's no function within, there's no variable being forced within this function, physics process function, it will only apply the default force from this one here. So if we run the game now, we'll be printing 10. The force is 10. So we're printing the value 10 rather than the value 1000. Now scopes don't end here. You can also have the consideration of scope in an if statement. So let's go to an if statement. So this is a last if statement here. Let's say variable t equal, hello, backspace, print t. So we try to print t, so we try to see if this is working, we try to see if we can call the variable t inside the if statement, and the answer is no, because we are getting an error. So what you can see here is that this variable t is indented. So once you realize here is that once something is indented, it means it is part of that scope. So we have here this force, this is indented, this is part of the function scope here. This variable t is part of this, well, it's part of this if statement here, so it's part of that scope. If it's not indented, it's not part of that scope. So you could take off this for now. I'll just highlight this and delete this. Oh, and I still want to mention the global variable in a script here, this level 1 script, is only limited to that level 1 script. So it can't go in player 1, it can't go in another script, well, it can't go in another script and access that same global variable. That's something I want to mention. Okay, so in this lecture, we learned how the scope of a variable changes based upon how we access it inside of a script. I mean, we achieved the objectives for this video lecture, so I'll end this video here. Thank you.